All right. Is it on? Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's roll. Kris, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Thanks for making the booking online.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've never met before, so this is really my first time knowing you and trying to know what you do. And I believe you have a club called Secret Training SG, but maybe we can start off about yourself and what's up with your bike.
Oh, okay. In terms of cycling, I've been cycling for about 7 years. That's something I had to teach myself how to ride a bike many years ago. But I used to do a lot of running, and I figured, adding another sport onto my endurance fitness would be beneficial. And then cycling was added in, and eventually swimming was added in, and eventually I started doing triathlons.
Right.
In terms of cycling, I got obviously the TT bike, but I love my road cycling as well, especially in local conditions. I feel the road bike is a lot more versatile. So I've got another 2 bikes. Takes a lot of space at home.
So what's the other 2 bikes? So the other 2 bikes are road bikes?
There are 2 road bikes. There are 2 Cipollini's.
Oh, Cipollini's.
Yes.
Wow, very unheard of in Singapore.
I mean, they're available through Entro. It's just that it's a rare bike.
Yeah.
Because it's pricey.
It is very pricey. I was looking at a couple of Cipollini's, but wow, when I saw the price, man, it's insane.
I mean, they're expensive because of the exclusivity. I mean, they're not greater than the other brands, but it's nice to have a bike that is not as popular as what you see on the road.
So which 2 Cipollini's do you have?
I got a RB1K.
Oh, that's a nice one.
That's a nice one. That's an Aero one.
Yeah.
That's a team issue. And an NK1K, which is like more of a SL7 type of bike, a bit of aero, a bit of endurance, just an all-around comfortable bike. Lovely to ride. Excellent.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we can get you on again, get the 2 bikes on the show.
We'll bring them.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for about 7 years, riding for 7 years.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, and tell us more about the first bike. How did you really get into the sport?
Oh, so I used to work at the sports medicine clinic in the Middle East that used to do a lot of work with cyclists and runners and triathletes. So just through my work in marketing, I used to meet a lot of them. Most of them were injured. I was like, try and understand, this sport is killing you, man, but you still pushing it.
Yeah.
So then I thought I'd give it a go.
Right.
And I got myself an MTB. On those old Scott heavy bikes, and just learned to ride on that, but very fast. It was like, no, this is not fast enough. So we did a road bike.
Okay.
So one of the first bikes I got was a Look 765. It's a carbon frame bike, ridiculously comfortable. It's an endurance bike, but very upright, and you feel like you're on a motorbike or something like that. So I brought it with me to Singapore. So when I moved to Singapore a few years back, I brought the Look and one of the Cipollini's. And that bike was lots of fun, but eventually I felt I need a TT bike. And I didn't have space at the time, so the Look had to go, and a TT bike came in.
Just yesterday I was over at TMCR, and there was this guy. I was trying to chase him so I can see his tail light at a distance, right? And I was like putting up so much power that I can't catch up to him, and I realized he was actually on a TT bike. I think I can't remember what giant model. And I kind of realized that people on TT bikes are it sounds stupid, but they are so much more faster than road bikes. Is it because of the position, or?
I mean, it's pure aero. Obviously, I mean, your saddle is a lot forward, so you're over the crank and you can put down power more efficiently. But there's no question about it. I mean, a TT bike from 7-8 years ago will be quicker than, a high-end road bike of today, purely because of aero. And I mean, especially if you're doing triathlons, there's no question about it. You got to be on a TT bike because there's a benefit in terms of the amount you hammer your thighs on the bike leg. A road bike is a lot harsher, and if you're going to run after riding a road bike for 90 or 180 Ks, your run is not going to be as strong as off a TT bike. So, that was one of the reasons.
So what's the difference between a TT and there's another bike, sorry, my brain is not really working today, time trial and a, what do you call the other bike that's also like in a TT position as well? Okay,
so you get 2 broad ranges. One is your TT bike that is UCI compliant, that you would see at, national time trial races, Tour de France sort of stuff. and you have your triathlon bike.
Triathlon, yeah.
Triathlon bike. So this is a triathlon bike mostly. The key difference is a triathlon bike doesn't have rules to it, whereas a UCI bike has certain specifications. Like for instance, the cockpit needs to be a certain way. You cannot add too much of aero jazz on it. It won't be compliant for that race. With the triathlon bike, it's everything goes. It doesn't need to even be a standard 2-triangle frame. So you can have without certain tubes on the bike, for instance. If you see the new bikes, they don't have the top tube.
Just like that Cervelo PX or P5?
The P5, and you get the P3X, the delta wing shape one. So that's a good example of a triathlon bike.
So there's no regulations around,
There's no regulations.
Right. So this is both a triathlon and a TT?
This is more of a triathlon bike. I mean, it's not UCI certified as far as I know.
It's a Canyon Speedmax, right?
It's a Canyon Speedmax.
Right.
How could I describe the main difference? Like for instance, on a TT bike, this piece wouldn't be allowed. You cannot add any aero jazz onto it. Whereas on a TT bike, this goes, and you'd use it for spare parts. You'd use it for whatever.
Okay, we'll get onto the bike a little bit later.
Yeah.
So you started off in UAE, in the Middle East.
Yeah.
How's the riding there like, and are bikes cheaper there? You talk about cars, right? You always see on social media they have like really nice cars. The police force has sports cars and stuff. Is it true?
Very much. I mean, they got a car culture because obviously the oil and everything, and cars are not taxed as much. Cars are affordable, and you'll find everybody with a car. In terms of bikes, I mean, I'd say the prices are similar, and the type of bikes they would ride is similar as well. The big difference is they don't ride on public roads as much as we do. There are dedicated cycling tracks that go through desert reserves.
Wow.
It's fantastic. I mean, you could go like 100, 120 kilometers without having to brake once. That's the sort of terrain. It's like as flat as ever.
Yeah.
And very safe. So if you're learning to ride a bike, I think there's no better place because you can do it in total peace and not have to worry about traffic or anything.
Wow, okay. And Secret Training SG, tell us about this.
So Secret Training is something I started a couple of years back because back in the UAE, one of my favorite nutrition products was Secret Training. And one of the first markets they launched was in the UAE. So when I moved to Singapore, I couldn't basically find it, and I thought, all right, here's an opportunity to really innovate in terms of nutrition because it's very much B2B cycling brand, as in they supply a lot of pro teams with the nutrition for the Grand Tours and so on. You would see the pro teams brand their bottles with other stuff, but what goes in is usually the secret, and that's where Secret Training comes by.
And is this important? So I'm assuming these are more like gels, hydration products. How important are all these for cyclists and athletes?
I mean, you have two types of cyclists. You have many types of cyclists. Let's take your pro. With a pro, it's absolutely critical because they are strategically using their nutrition for performance. So by strategically, I would mean each rider knows exactly how much of carbs they need for a particular race. They know when to take the carbs. They know how much of fluids to take. It's structured very well for performance. So for instance, if you're entering a flat stage, you would have a different nutrition profile versus a climb-in stage, multi-day versus a classic, and so on. So for them, it's all down to the last detail. For a recreational cyclist, the benefit comes in day-to-day performance, and how can you get the most of your riding? Like for instance, you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like having breakfast, but you think, okay, I'll go for my ride, and you're like thinking, all right, I'm going to burn some fat today. And then after you ride 1 hour into your ride, and then your second hour you see your power numbers starting to fluctuate a little bit. And then we're still okay. We will stop at the petrol shed and get whatever. And then you get into the third hour, and you're like, all right, now it's a struggle. I will get to the end, a little bit of bunk. And then at the end of your ride, you're so hungry, and you eat half a hawker center worth of stuff. See, and if you want to improve, that's probably not the best way to go. If you were doing it in a structured way, you'd have your energy gels taken at specific points. You'd have taken a hydration solution or an energy drink with enough sodium in it and enough carbs, to fuel your ride. And then at the end of that ride, you'd feel a lot better. You would have performed better. You won't be as hungry, and you'd be ready and fresh to ride the next day again. If you get what I mean. The recovery period is a lot better. It's shorter.
Yeah.
So that's where the nutrition becomes really critical. But not all nutrition is the same. I mean, somebody could argue and say, I can just take a sandwich on the way, and I could just take jelly beans or whatever. And yeah, you're getting your carbs. But where cycling nutrition differs is it's very technical in the sense you're not taking too many carbs or too little carbs in each product. Your energy gel is always specified. It's X amount of carbs or calories per sachet. You can plan to take so many per hour. And you can structure things out. And at the same time, while you're training or while you're riding hard, it's not the place where you want to be taking confectionery. The two don't go. You're not going to the gym while eating a Mars bar. So why do it on a bike ride just because it's carbs? So yeah, that's where cycling nutrition really comes in.
I can totally relate when you mentioned the point of going hungry and going to the hawker center and eating everything. Just yesterday I was riding. Because I'm not a morning person.
Yep.
When I wake up at 5 a.m. to go for my ride, I'm just so sleepy and groggy. I just don't want to talk to anyone. But I got to force myself to eat right in the morning. But I'm not really a breakfast person. And after my ride of about 70 clicks, I was coming home. I texted my wife, if you're awake, please cook 2 pieces of French toast for me. I'm so hungry. I gotta eat something. So
Yep.
I'm a bit skeptical about these kind of products, mainly because of the ingredients that go into it. I mean, it's so scientific. I have no idea.
Yep.
Will there be any side effects to my body taking this long term?
See, I mean, there's a time and place for everything. And you take cycling nutrition or you take energy drinks. They have carbs, and they're not the sort of amount of carbs you would want to take if you're not training. Like, you wouldn't take an energy gel just for the heck of it. Like, you won't have it like candy, for instance. So as long as you're burning it and you're taking it with a purpose, there's no problem. I mean, all our energy gels and energy drinks, they don't have anything artificial in it. So I mean, they're reasonably healthy in terms of the additives that are added on. I mean, you for instance, you get certain gym products. Like, you get these pre-workouts with crazy amounts of caffeine and artificial sweeteners. They'll say 0 sugar, but it's loaded with an artificial sweetener, which, for instance, it could dull your perception of sugar, which would mean you would be eating a lot more sugar when you get real sugar. So, there are certain side effects that can happen. But if you get in the right product, by all means, you could use it every time you're training. I'd say, in general, up to an hour you can manage without fuel, but beyond an hour, it's good practice to take some sort of carb.
And where can people find your products?
So we have several retailers, like we got Epitome Studio, we got Keep Our Sports, Pro Cycles, 1-2 Cycle, which is just nearby, and of course the Cyclist Mass. And online as well. So it's available reasonably freely. Right.
Okay. So if anyone wants to check them out, they can go to all these places.
Yes.
All right. So we've deviated a little bit. Back to the bike. Tell us about this Canyon Speedmax. Why did you get this bike, and the process of buying this?
Okay, the process was very, very hard. But I'll start off with the reason that floated around my head before I sort of thought of it. So I had an Argon 18 before this, which is a good bike, and I had no problems with it. But I felt that bike was in a place where I couldn't trust it, especially in a race. Like, when you go for a race, the bike has to be disassembled, and then you're assembling it again. So I like the bike to be very simple and everything to sort of, work without a hassle. And this particular Argon had these proprietary brakes, TRP, lousy rim brakes, and you touch it, it goes out of line, and there's no mechanic other than the best mechanics that could sort it out.
Was this a triathlon bike?
A triathlon bike as well.
Okay.
But so those brakes, they were always on my mind. Every time I travel with the bike, I'm like, all right, when we take it out, are those brakes going to work or they're not? And at one race, like the front was rubbing, and just like put my finger and it just broke the wire. I'm like, all right, we don't need a front brake.
Wow. Okay.
So in a flat race, that's not a problem. But I mean, it's not the sort of thing you want to travel with. And the position of the bike as well. I mean, there was certain adjustments that I could not do on the bike that not essential, but these sort of things work in your head over the course of a long race. So I decided to sell it, and see, the options for disc brake TT bikes, they aren't great, and the options that are there are pretty pricey. So obviously Canyon, delivers very good value. So I came across the CF frame, which wasn't available in ETAP or Di2 or anything like that. So I had to actually bring this bike down in mechanical and get a lot of parts locally, source a lot of parts locally to make it actually to the spec that I wanted. So it started life out with an Ultegra mechanical group set. That came out completely. We went with a SRAM force setup for the crank, and SRAM rail at the back, rival for the FD, and in front you have the whole SRAM setup, which you have the aero shifters, which are ridiculously difficult to get. It was like the hardest part to get in this build. And you have your remote shifters, which conveniently just tape up onto the brake levers.
Right.
Power meter is from this brand. I don't know how we pronounce it. Sigei.
Yeah, some Chinese one, right?
Chinese one, but I find it's excellent, and especially because it's spindle based. I mean, triathlon bikes get bashed up around a bit because you're traveling with them. So I didn't want anything on the pedals or on the crank. I really like a power meter that's spindle based. So I went with that. It's been pretty good actually. The numbers, they tally well across my bike. So I'm happy with it.
Okay. So obviously Canyon, you can only buy them online.
Yeah.
How old is this bike?
This bike, I got it for, I think it's about 6 months at the most. Yeah.
So do you pay like COVID price for it, or was it already after the COVID era that price kind of dropped a little bit?
I think the Canyon prices have generally been steady. And they have these ups and downs in terms of they have outlet bikes, they have the normal sale price bikes and so on. But I think the pricing, like if you compare it to a similar, let's say a Cervelo, there's a big difference in terms of how much you save. The Cervelo, I mean, it's arguable as to how quick it is or how great it is in terms of a frame overall, but the Canyon suited my purpose.
Was supply an issue? Do you have to wait long to have this bike online, or was it already there on the website?
No, it wasn't. I had to be. So what I first did is I thought, all right, I'm going to wait 1 month and see if stocks are going to come in ETAP or Di2. Didn't happen. And then my race was getting close, and I think, okay, I need to start training for this race. And then the mechanical version was available, so I ordered that, and it was delivered reasonably fast. I think not more than a week, really. You get hammered on taxes and procurement charges and all of that.
Yeah.
But,
I think it's still value for money for a Canyon. For what you're getting and how much you're paying, it's pretty much value compared to all the other brands out there. Mainly because they don't have like physical retail stores and everything's online, right?
For sure.
The only problem, I wouldn't call it a problem, it's just that the taxes that you've mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And they always run out of stock.
Stock is never available.
At that time, I don't know about now, because I think everyone's always talking about oversupply of bikes right now. Like the COVID era is gone. All the demand that people were wanting during the COVID era, and now that most cyclists are not there anymore, there's just way oversupply of bikes that's coming, right? And I think bike shops are worried about that.
I don't know. I mean, Canyon, they've not got their stocks up to the pre-COVID levels as yet. And like at least like 6 months ago when I was looking for a bike, I couldn't find like the sizes and so on, even from the other manufacturers that I wanted. So I'd say, I mean, if you're willing to wait and a bit patient, the Canyon is a good option. But there are, all brands offer something different.
How did you know this? What size is this?
This is size small.
Small. Did you go for a bike fit?
I work with several bike fitters, including I think Ben is one of the bike fitters who's fitted me, and Alan from Performance Bike Fitter. So they had fitted my previous bike, and I had a pretty good idea of where my size is. And with Canyon, it's easy because you got your XS and your S. The XS comes with 650B wheels, and the S comes with regular wheels. And I'm not going anywhere near 650B wheels. I don't want it.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, let's go with an S. It runs slightly large, but it fits me. Yeah.
So you tinkered with the setup here on your own, or?
So this was fitted by Performance Bike Fitter.
This was by Performance.
Yeah.
And then how important is a bike fit for a triathlete?
I'd say it's absolutely crucial. Like it's almost impossible to ride a TT bike without getting a proper fit, because there are so many elements. Your cockpit. Like for instance, my cockpit, I needed to cut the aero bars and bring them slightly closer to me because I'm not as flexible as your regular athlete. Getting the saddle position right. I mean, you're riding the bike in a single position, in a single crouch position for a long period. There's no rest in. As in a road bike, you can sit up and you can move around a bit more. Whereas the TT bike, you're sort of locked in to position. So I think it's an absolute must to get a bike fit on a TT bike.
Have you done an Ironman before?
Yes, I've done several 70.3s. Like my ambitions are on the 70.3s versus the full Ironman.
Right. Can you walk us through the distances that a triathlete covers in all three disciplines of swimming, running, and cycling?
All right. So a 70.3 would start off with a 1.9 kilometer swim, and then you would do a 90K bike, and then you would do a 21.09 run, which is a half marathon. So that's the 70.3 distance. Double that and you got a full Ironman.
You've not done the full Ironman yet.
Right now that's not on the agenda.
But it's crazy. I mean, wow, 20 kilometers of running. I started doing a bit of half marathons before I started cycling, and 21 kilometers for me was the max. I can't even imagine doing 42. But you guys are doing 21K runs, 1.9K swimming, and cycling. Which is the toughest one for you?
From the three, see, it's difficult. Like if you look at them individually, it doesn't represent the whole, because a triathlon is not about being good at swimming or cycling or running. It's about how you transition between the two. So I would say, like, if you can get to the run without having cramps and be able to run at a reasonable pace, I'd say the run is probably the most challenging of the three, because your legs are smashed. Just going up a climb could trigger a cramp, and if you cramp, then it becomes just a lousy practice after that. Then it's survivor.
So on these kind of events, races, right?
Yeah. How
fast are you going on the bike?
I mean, you always want to be under 3 hours on the bike. So I average in 30ish. A stronger cyclist, you need to be in that 35K average to.
Oh, that's quite high.
But you're on the TT bike, on a flat course, without traffic, without stops, without anything. It's perfectly doable.
Okay. What's the weight of the bike again?
It's just under 10 kilos. I mean, the listed weight is about 9.6 something, and I think with the bottle cage and little add-ons, probably closer to 10.
And for triathlon bikes, nobody really bothers about weight, right?
I mean, it's good to have a lighter bike, but it's not as critical as a road bike, because you're generally going in a straight line. Less emphasis on handling. Even if you have to climb, you can sort of hoist the bike over the climb, and you can make up a lot of time on the descents after that. So it's not as critical.
How light does TT triathlon bike goes?
Pardon?
How light can it go? What's the lightest that you've seen?
I mean, you get bikes that go on the 8ish.
Wow.
Yeah, with a lot of carbon, but a light bike is not necessarily a fast bike, because, for instance, you put a disc wheel at the back, your weight numbers changed completely.
Right.
But obviously with the disc wheel, and if you have the power numbers to sustain a disc wheel, you're going to be faster than, the lightest bike.
Yeah. I know you said when you bought this bike, it came with a Shimano Ultegra mechanical. What's the reason that it's totally revamped to a SRAM system now?
See, the mechanical system, you get these the levers up front, which is, it's uncomfortable to shift it because you've got to be in your aero position every time you change gears. But whereas with ETAP and Di2, it's just a button, and you just want to be focusing on the power rather than on the finesse of changing mechanical stuff.
Yeah. Why don't you just get the SRAM version then? Do they have it in SRAM?
Pardon?
Why don't you just get the whole bike in SRAM?
Oh, it wasn't available.
Okay. And you just needed a bike for the race?
I needed a bike for the race, and I went by the strength of the frame. This Canyon frame was what I wanted.
So it was all like a mix and match. Is that the reason why you've SRAM Red and then SRAM Force?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I went with SRAM Red is SRAM Red and the Aero kit, they generally come together. They're one pairing. You get the Aero shifters and SRAM Red all together in one pack.
Okay.
Then in terms of the crank, I had the option to go in for Rival, but Rival, the power meter comes in with this battery that goes in through the bottom bracket, which just adds weight, and I mean, I just didn't like that setup. It didn't seem the most durable of setups for me. And like I said, I wanted the spindle-based power, and the Force crank takes in the spindle-based power meter.
Yeah, go ahead.
And looks a lot better because I think it's a carbon-based finished.
Yeah, and look pedals are not very common. Why did you go for look?
See, I mean, it's a necessary evil because my other bikes and other shoes all have look, and I got to keep using look. I mean, I'd say that they're probably the less reliable between Shimano and look. Like I have so many look pedals, they just corrode very easily. So this pedal, actually, I got the lower end pedal rather than the carbon pedals, purely because this is spring based. And spring based pedals you can service, whereas the carbon blade based pedals, the screws just keep corroding off.
Which part of the screws are you referring to?
The inner screws, right there.
Right.
And the plates keep lifting up, and it's almost $200 a pedal, and I'm like spending every year. That's not right.
Yeah, I thought it was very cool that Look had that blade and everything. Looked kind of cool, but now that I hear that there's problems, I don't know if I want to get that anymore.
I mean, it looks nice, and if you don't sweat as much, I mean, may work for some riders, but personally for me, they've been reasonably unreliable. Previous generation Look, yeah, for sure. They lasted long. I have like old sets of Look pedals that are still running, but whereas some pedals like 8-9 months, and they're already beginning to show signs.
Maybe just a few more questions from me on because I'm not a triathlete at all. These kind of frames, right? What are all the Bento boxes for? What do you normally use them?
Okay, so the Bento box on the top, I would usually use it for nutrition. So my energy gels and so on would go in there. The lower box, they say, is for tools, but really in a race, like if you're using tubeless tires, you don't need to carry tubes. So like I go with the notion that alright, if something goes wrong with the tubeless tire, you're screwed. It's pointless. You're trying to rectify it from there onwards. It's going to be a real mess. Just come home after that.
Yeah.
So I don't carry spares during races.
So it's empty in there.
It's empty. It's empty.
Can you just remove it?
Yeah, it's removable.
But it's aero gains, right?
So they say. So I'm like, yeah, why not?
Okay.
Why not?
Right, and you have 2 bottles at the back.
Yes. So I mean, those are my race hydration bottles. So 800 ml each. During a race, I may put another small bottle up front that would just be for salt, just a pure sodium solution from Secret Training that is to counter cramps. My energy drinks will go in the back.
Okay.
Generally for a race, you're riding, let's say, 3 hours. You need to target at least 500 ml an hour minimum.
Right.
So as this setup on its own is not enough for fluid, so I will take 1 bottle from the course and dispose of 1 bottle from what I would carry. Are
you running a Garmin or a Wahoo?
I run a Garmin, yeah.
So do you have a setup where it reminds you to take your drink?
You could add the alerts in. But generally in my head, I go by time, and I have a good idea of what I'm doing in during a race. Especially on the salt side, it's like every 15 minutes I need to have X amount of salt, because I mean that's the biggest factor in a race in terms of cramps. You don't want to cramp; it ruins everything.
Yeah. What are you normally looking at the screen when you're racing on your computer?
I like to say speed, but it's usually power. Like I would have a power for the first phase, for the first 15 minutes of the race. Then if it's a flat course, you can keep a power target, 180 watts or thereabouts for X amount of time. If there are climbs, then power will probably be less of a factor, because I would be saving up a lot for those climbs and look at the power only on the flat sections. And then especially in a 70.3, I like to sort of calm down and relax during the last 15-20 minutes of the bike leg, just to give the legs a bit of a break before the run.
Right. You've got running to do, you've got swimming to do, you've got 2 other road bikes, you've got this triathlon bike. How do you know what sport to do each day? We've only got 7 days a week.
No, I mean, once you've been doing it for a few years, it becomes very habitual, and you have a program in your head. You wake up on a Monday, I know, okay, I got my swim, and if I'm doing a bike build phase, I will do one now on the turbo. That's not negotiable. That happens. Then Tuesday I have my runs. Wednesday I will have my swim again. Thursday I will probably do a swim or a bike again, a bike or a run depending on the week. Friday will be your endurance swim. Saturday will be your long ride. Sunday will be your long run, and that just goes, pretty much the whole time. At the same time, you need a coach. Especially when you're like 3-4 months before a race, you need somebody to put things in perspective and look at your exertion levels and just monitor your numbers to see if you're actually progressing or whether you're just executing workouts for the sake of executing it.
I already feel so tired that you are occupied every single day. Do you have I'm assuming rest days are very crucial as well, right?
I mean, rest days, like I can remember, like there's like maybe once every few months there's a rest day, but generally I like to keep every day. I'll do a workout every day. The advantage triathletes have is you have your swim, and your swim doesn't smash your body as much as the other two. It's not a weight bearing workout, so you can layer in the swim as a recovery day.
So on your bike days, or when you go biking, do you normally take out the road bike or on the triathlon bike?
See, if it's 3-4 months before a race, it'll definitely be the triathlon bike. But if I'm not training for anything, if it's just maintenance, it'll always be the road bike, because you can go more places on the road bike. You can take it anywhere in the country and not be uncomfortable. The TT bike, I mean, you take it through CBD, for instance, it's terrible. Stopping, starting. And I mean, obviously the saddle is not in a comfortable position for that. So I will just take the TT bike only for TMCR or Seletor or Limchikang, those routes.
Right. And it's mostly solo rides, or you ride in group?
Right. I ride with friends. I mean, if I'm out of a training cycle, but if I'm on a training cycle, especially using the TT bike, it's not the safest thing to be riding in a pack. So I'm not going to rock up in a TT bike when the others on road bikes.
Yeah.
So do a lot of solo training, but obviously a lot of social rides as well.
Yeah.
You can use those as your recovery days.
Yeah, right. Okay, before I move on to the next segment, which is some of the questions on Instagram, maybe you could give us a bit of a wrap up about the performance of these bikes, just in case somebody who's watching might want to buy a Canyon Speedmax. Any tips and tricks they should look out for, or what's your opinion on the review of this bike?
I think it's a great bike, especially if you're on a rim brake generation TT bike. I'd say the disc brake setup is a lot tighter and you can trust the brakes a lot more. You take a course like, let's say, Langkawi, where you have steep descents and you need to modulate the brakes here and there. Any day I would pick a disc brake TT bike over a rim brake TT bike. The other thing is, these new bikes are a lot more compliant. than the previous generation bikes from about 3 years ago. By compliant, I mean, they're less twitchy in the wind. They're not as sluggish when you need to quickly stand up on the bike and get up a hill or move fast in certain situations. So I'd really say if you're thinking of if you have a bike from about 3 years ago, it's a good thing to consider an upgrade. You just enjoy your racing more. It's so much more easier to maintain as well. I mean, new bikes, the screws are not as rusty as your older bikes, and I'd say go for it. It's a good thing to go for. Yeah.
Will you make any more upgrades onto this bike?
See, on this bike, I think I pretty much got it. I mean, it's a rider that needs upgrades from here on. Especially on TT bikes, it's a race bike. I'm not worried about it being pretty or even getting scratches and so on. That's fine. It's going to be bashed about. It's going to go in transition. I'm going to ride with salt after swimming in the sea, dripping all over it. You got to treat a bike as a race instrument as opposed to something that's pretty. You can have a bike that you would keep for that purpose, but a race bike, just use it for its purpose and you'll get the most out of it.
Because you just said that after swimming it's swim, bike, run, right? So after the swim you get onto the bike and all that salt from the seawater. Do you find it damaging your TT bike more than your normal road bike?
Oh, for sure. I mean, salt and metal is going to only end in one thing. But so you got to wipe it down and you got to keep it a lot cleaner and you got to maintain it. The more you maintain, the longer you get out of the bike. But in a race situation, the bike will be out maybe in the rain, it will be in the sun, and then you get on the bike with the salt. The bike gets eaten up a lot faster than your regular road bike.
Right. And
you got to look at it like that. It's a race instrument. That's what it's there for. You're buying it for that. You're not buying it for its lovely paintwork or anything. It just needs to, get you to the run safely, basically.
Right. Okay. So we'll just move on to the next segment, which is IG questions. A couple of funny roast and questions. Okay. The first one: what is your favorite PCN to ride on?
My favorite. ECP. If anybody says it's not the ECP, I question why not.
But you never bring this onto the ECP, do you?
I live near the ECP, so I need to get onto the ECP to get to TMCR.
But it's a dangerous place to go, especially on the weekends. There's just kids and families running all over the place.
It's scary.
Yeah.
And I feel really bad. These kids and families. It's their place. It's not the cyclist place. Bring your race bike on the piece and be upset that they're running across. So that's the way it is.
Yeah. Next one is a funny one. Is it 9.3 kilograms or 93 kilograms? That thing looks sturdy but also comfy with that sofa for a saddle.
I mean, this is the saddle that it came with, and I suppose, like I said, it's closer to 10. But the saddle is very nice. I mean, it's hard and it's got a nice hook. That's very useful in transition. You can hang your bike up and it won't move in the wind. So it's a triathlon specific saddle, but I like a really nice hard one. Like you get the ISM saddles that are a little bit more comfy, but you tend to move around on it a bit more. So I prefer a harder saddle.
Yeah, the ISM ones are very chunky, and I think those are triathlon specific
They're
saddles.
Triathlon specific, yeah.
So on your two other road bikes, do you have them in the short nose as well, just like your triathlon bike?
No, they're completely different saddles. So the funny thing about saddles and me is I don't have one specific saddle that I will use across the bikes. Like each bike has a different saddle and I cannot interchange them. When I interchange them, I'm just very uncomfortable. So I like the specialized power saddle on the road bike in general. That's a very good saddle. So that's one I have on my Cipollini.
Thoughts about 3D printed ones? Because you like very firm saddles, right?
I mean, if I don't have a reason to consider a 3D printed saddle because off the shelf it works perfectly fine. And what I like about, for instance, a branded saddle is it's been tested, it's been tried, and they've gone through their quality control. There's nothing's going to happen to it. So I take that any day over a 3D printed one.
The next is a roast on the color of your bike.
Yep.
That's the color on the P chart of the hydration in the SAF. Do you fancy the color of this bike? Or were you just, I just needed a bike for the race. I don't care what color it comes in.
See, I like this color, the flu yellow, because I have another bike in the same color. Like one of my Cipolinis is in black and this yellow combination. I think it really works, especially from a safety point of view. You're going to be seen all over. And in transition, it's actually useful because you can see the bike from a further distance. Like I wear glasses. So after a swim, I'm not wearing my glasses. I'm like looking for my bike, and like you have this yellow thing standing out is a lot easier because there's a sea of black and blue, especially in the men's section of.
So it's very practical.
It's a practical color.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you said that when you go for these races, it might be a bit hilly.
Yeah.
Do they normally plan the course so that it's flat? Because it wouldn't make sense to have a hill on a triathlon bike, right?
I mean. I would go off. I would approach different races differently, right? But I feel as a triathlete, you must try all sorts of courses. You mustn't, think, all right, that particular place is all hills. We will not go for that. We will go for the flat one. You try it and just give it a go. Like for instance, you take Langkawi. Langkawi is regarded as a tough course because of the climbs. You get climbs that are named after sisters and brothers and all sorts of crazy stuff. But then see, what goes up must come down. And you have like crazy fast descents, which allow you to rest. But whereas on a flat course, it's constant power. You got to hold the power. You can't mess around. You can't drop your power numbers. You're gonna mess up your bike. So it's good to have that variation because it changes your training as well.
Yeah.
The way you would train for a hilly route is different to the way you would train for a flat route, for instance.
So when you come down on a descent on a triathlon bike, are you mainly on that aero position because you don't have the access to the brakes, right? It can be a bit dangerous, and when you corner, how does that even happen?
I will sit up.
Right.
I mean, you would have your brave athlete that's capable of sort of switching between the two on descents. But I would always sit up and start using the brakes on a descent, or at least have access to the brakes.
Have you ever been in a situation in a race where you had some mechanical issues and you needed to fix them by yourself?
Thankfully, no. Like I'm the sort of person, like before a race, I'll just take it to the bike shop and not be smart and tell them, check every last thing, change every last thing.
Yeah.
Tires, change it, tubes, change it. Because like I don't want to go for a race and skimp on a small thing after having spent so much of resources getting to that race. Just change your tires. Never mind if there's another 1,000 more to go or 2,000 more, just change the tire and do a reliable setup.
So before every race, you change your tires?
Yeah, I mean, so let's say you do 2 races a year. Generally, if you've been training and you've been riding consistently, you're going to have hit, like 4,000 every 6 months easily. So you might as well just put new tires. I mean, it's not that it's cheap, it's an investment, but if you look at how much you're spending to get to that race, you don't want to skimp on it.
And the go-to tires are Vittoria Corsas.
Yeah, this bike, I like the Vittoria Corsas as a race tire. I find like very supple in comparison to the Continental. But I'd say the Continental tire is a better all-round tire, and it's a bit more punch resistant in general, but there's very little to choose between the two. I mean, I'd say go with whichever is available.
So this one is much more puncture resistant, or the GP?
I think the GP is a bit
much
more, yeah.
I was considering of getting the Vittorias. I've been on GPs for the longest ever time, but I've heard people saying that the Vittorias are much more faster.
I mean, they feel a lot more supple. There's like a very nice feeling that's like close to a tubular tire feeling on the Vittoria. But I mean, you're not losing anything out with a Continental tire. I mean, it's a world-class tire. There's no question.
Okay, let me pick another question. Have you ever gotten criticism for a mixed group set?
A mixed group set? I mean, what's there to criticize? I mean, it serves a purpose. I mean, it's not like you're mixing and matching weird groups or anything. It's very functional. I mean, you take SRAM, especially the front derailleur. There's very, other than weight, the internal mechanism is the same between Red, Rival, and Force. So there's there's no point in spending an extra 200-300 just to get the branding on it.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? You might remove the FD and just run it as a 1x setup in the end.
Yeah.
But
Do you actually even use the small cog on the front?
Very little. I mean, if you're climbing, you want to get on it just to save the legs. But I'd say on a day-to-day basis, it's not needed. You can run it as a 1x setup. Especially because on SRAM, if you look at the front, your front cog is a 40. It's a 48. So which is relatively small in comparison to like a 52 compact on Shimano.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can easily run it without the small chainring.
The last question from the user was, why did you decide on SRAM, not Shimano, which I think you've answered earlier was because of the shifters at the front, right?
Shifters at the front, and there's an interesting thing that differs significantly between the two. See, on Shimano, shifting between the small and large chain ring is completely synchro. So you got to like press the button and let it change until the system decides, all right, I want to change onto the smaller or get onto the larger ring. Whereas with SRAM, you can do it in manual mode. You squeeze both buttons, and you can shift between the chain rings, which is the old school way of Shimano. You can't do that with the current generation of Shimano. And I find that's a nice feature to have, especially on a hilly course where you're climbing up and you want to quickly descend on a larger chain ring. It's just a nicer feeling to have more control.
Kris, that is the end of everything. Thank you so much once again. If you've got anything that you would like to mention, this is your chance. Anything if you want to mention to the viewers.
I mean, thanks for having me, and thanks for welcoming Secret Training. I mean, you guys can see Secret Training on my t-shirt, and if you guys would like to try out Secret Training, or if you haven't heard of Secret Training, just look for us on Instagram. Message us if you're not sure about cycle nutrition, if you're not sure where to start, if you're not sure of how much to take or what type of product to take, just message our team and we'll be more than happy to help you out. We're a small business. We're not massive. We're not massive in Singapore. We're not massive in the UK, which is where the products are made. We're a small company, so your support goes a long way. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Kris.
Like I did yesterday.